Well, I have to say that was a hard act to follow. I've been asked to talk about things that I wish I had known when I was younger, and further, what lessons I would like to pass on. Since a little humor is always helpful, perhaps the first thing I should have known as recently as a few weeks ago that I should avoid ministers looking for participants in Sunday services. But that would not be quite true, because, as most of you know, I'm willing to get up in front of almost any audience, whether they want to hear me or not. Indeed, only a year ago, I took an entire Sunday service to honor the birthday of my hero, Winston Churchill, and tell you more about him than perhaps you needed or wanted to hear. So perhaps my message should be, ministers, be careful about whom you invite into the pulpit when they think they have something to say. A bit more seriously, an early lesson for me concerned approximately half the human race, the female half, or at least that part of the female half that was approximately my own age. As a young man, girls both fascinated and terrified me. Some of my male friends seemed to have no difficulty in forming close relationships with the girls we knew. They went on dates, they studied together. Desirable as this seemed, I had no idea how to make it happen for me. Girls were mysterious beings, unapproachable, except in perhaps the most casual and unromantic way. That which we can't seem to do sometimes becomes the subject of scorn and critical comment to those who seem to be succeeding. And I think I was a bit obnoxious in my comments and attitudes towards the boys and girls in my circle. But to their great credit and my eternal gratitude, they put up with me and remained my friends, some of them even to the present day. In a little bit, I will talk about forgiveness and understanding and finding the good in people, often beneath a crust that masks fear and uncertainty. For the moment, however, I will say that eventually I found women as interesting, charming, and approachable, even if it's still as mysterious as I'm sure they find us men. Let us cheer both the mystery and the relationships that make us better and more interesting to each other. Another lesson from my earlier years, but a lesson that has persisted ever since. If something is interesting, study it and make it your own. But be aware that things that seem difficult and of no interest now may be immensely useful in the future and probably harder to learn. I began my college education as an engineering student and did dismally in math and engineering drawing. Government, political theory, and history were utterly absorbing and became my major subjects. Making a living from them, however, proved difficult. By good fortune, I had an engineer for a father, and for 7 years worked on the maintenance staff of a large resort hotel, where I got a very practical education in electrical and mechanical systems, backstopped by a father who supplied the theory. It took me 7 years to acquire, some of which I could have gotten in 3. But before I retired, I had directed 3 design and drafting departments and was probably the only member of the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers with a degree in government. My message, particularly to young folks, is to take every opportunity to learn, even when it is difficult to see the future benefit. Forgiveness and understanding. In all my 82 years, I have personally known only 2 people that I still think of as having no redeeming virtue and value. One lied and cheated to achieve his own ends and to the very great harm of others. The other person did not have a mean streak. He was mean throughout, top to bottom and side to side. History has a few examples of utterly worthless men, other than the two I've mentioned, but I did not know them, and of the hundreds and maybe thousands of people that I have known, all except those two had some good in them. Perhaps hard to find, but we must take people as they are, look for the good, and refrain from telling them how to be better. It is a great temptation to do this unasked, for of course we know what would be best for others, but it is a sure way to lose friends without influencing them. In this connection, consider the words of Jesus as recorded in the Gospel according to Matthew. Judge not that ye be not judged, for with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged, and with what measure ye mete, it shall be measured unto you. And why beholdest the mote in thy brother's eye, but not consider the beam that is in thine own eye? Further to what I have learned over many years and will pass on for whatever wisdom is in that learning, as both a student in history and an observer of our own times, I do not trust and warn against any person or group who claims to know the will of God. The long, tragic, regrettable history of persecution, killing, burning, and torture because God has commanded it reaches from today's news back into the shadows of antiquity. In those ancient shadows, we have in the Old Testament book of Numbers the charming story of God's instruction to Moses. Vex the Midianites and smite them, and they slew all the males, and they took all the women of Midian captives and their little ones. And Moses said unto them, Have ye saved the women alive? Now therefore kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman that hath known a man by lying with him. But all the women children that have not known a man by lying with them, keep them for yourselves. More recently, we have only to look at the current savagery in the Middle East to consider what kind of people, to wonder what kind of people think God has ordered beheadings of innocents and the slaughter of those who read the Koran and the history of Islam in a different way. I hasten to equally condemn Jews who are equally sure that God has given them the sole right to the ancient land of Israel, and Christians who are sure that God has told them the unalterable rules of human behavior. Indeed, Christians have cheerfully tortured, burned, and slaughtered each other for centuries. A pope applauded the 1572 killing of about 5,000 French Protestants in the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. Protestant Geneva burned Michael Servetus for questioning the doctrine of the Trinity. We currently have folks from the Westboro Church in Topeka, Kansas, who tell us God hates America because we harbor homosexuals. All this because someone claims to know the will of God. I'm not sure about God, but I am very sure that any God that orders or condones the crimes that over so many centuries have been done in his, her, its name is not my God, and those who claim to hear divine commands of intolerant savagery must be viewed with the utmost suspicion. I hope I have not overly belabored those who claim to hear God, because those who are sure that they hear other voices or commandments can be as bad or worse. Two examples from my own lifetime. Adolf Hitler knew that the Jews were the problem for Germany and for the human race. Joseph Stalin apparently sincerely believed that the communist paradise could only be achieved if the peasant proprietors, the kulaks, were eliminated. Many starved and thousands, perhaps millions, were killed because of the certainties of these two men. At this point, I should probably step down from my soapbox and from this pulpit, but I have a little more to say, notably about the paradox implicit in asking for less certainty when we must all choose our courses and not be as a leaf drifting aimlessly on the stream. Oliver Cromwell, who ruled England for 11 years without a king, the king whom he had voted to be head, had very great certainties on matters both religious and political, but famously and gutsily, pardon the pun, wrote, "I beseech you in the bowels of Christ to consider that ye may be mistaken." So how to choose? It is often said, be reasonable and use your powers of reason. But it is perfectly possible to reason to a false or dangerous conclusion, and most of us, certainly me, have done it many times. Immanuel Kant proposed a remedy that I have found a valuable guide. He called it the categorical imperative, which briefly stated, says, act only in accordance with that principle which you would wish to see universalized. If your reasoning leads you to a conclusion that is fine for others but not for you, there is something wrong with your reasoning. Finally, some words of wisdom that have meant much to me since I first heard them in this church 65 years ago. And now may the truth that makes us free, and the hope that never dies, and the love that casts out fear lead us forward together until the dayspring breaks and the shadows flee away. And while we toil amidst things as they are, may the vision of things yet to come strengthen and inspire us.